The applause was deafening. Elena stood on the stage of Carnegie Hall, her fingers still trembling from the final notes of Chopin's ballade. The audience rose to their feet and she smiled, bowing gracefully in her elegant black gown. This was her life. This was everything she had worked for since she was 5 years old. 20 years of practice, sacrifice, and dedication had led to this moment. She took one last bow and walked off stage, her heels clicking against the polished floor. The stage manager congratulated her with a warm handshake. Her manager was already on the phone, probably booking her next performance. Elena felt exhausted but satisfied. She made her way to the dressing room, sat down, and closed her eyes for just a moment. When she opened them again, everything was wrong. The ceiling above her was cracked and stained with water damage. The silk sheets she expected to feel were replaced by a thin, scratchy blanket that smelled of mildew. Elena sat up quickly, her heart pounding. This wasn't her hotel room. This wasn't anywhere she recognized. The room was tiny, barely large enough for the narrow bed she was lying on. A small wooden dresser stood against one wall, its paint peeling. A single bare bulb hung from the ceiling, casting harsh shadows. The window was small and dirty, showing only darkness outside. Elena looked down at her hands and gasped. These weren't her hands. Her fingers had always been long and elegant, carefully manicured, protected like precious instruments. These hands were rough, the nails cut short and uneven. There were calluses on the palms and small cuts across the knuckles. She touched her face, feeling features that seemed both familiar and strange. She scrambled off the bed and found a small cracked mirror hanging on the wall. The face staring back at her was not her own. It was younger, rounder, with tired eyes and messy black hair pulled into a simple ponytail. She was wearing a plain gray dress that looked like some kind of uniform. Elena stumbled backward, her mind racing. Was this a dream? A nightmare? She pinched herself hard, but nothing changed. The room remained the same. The unfamiliar face in the mirror remained the same. Then the memories started flooding in. They weren't her memories, but somehow she could access them like files in a computer. This body belonged to someone named Maya. She was 24 years old and worked as a maid at a place called Riverside Manor. The memories were fragmented and confusing, mixing with Elena's own thoughts. A loud banging on the door made her jump. Maya, get up, you lazy girl. Breakfast service starts in 20 minutes, and if you're late again, you'll regret it. The voice was harsh and sharp. Elena's new memories told her this was Mrs. Patterson, the head housekeeper. The woman who made Maya's life miserable every single day. I'm coming, Elena heard herself say, though the voice wasn't hers. It was softer, quieter, with a slight accent she didn't recognize. She dressed quickly in the only other uniform hanging in the cramped closet. Her hands moved automatically, guided by Maya's muscle memory. Within minutes, she was rushing down a narrow servant's staircase, her mind still trying to process what was happening to her. The kitchen was already bustling with activity. Several other staff members moved efficiently between stations, preparing breakfast trays. The smell of fresh bread and coffee filled the air, but Elena's stomach churned with anxiety rather than hunger. You're 2 minutes late, Mrs. Patterson said coldly, appearing beside her like a hawk swooping on prey. She was a tall, thin woman with sharp features and gray hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch her face. That's 2 minutes of wages docked. I'm sorry, I don't want excuses. Take these trays to the morning room. And don't you dare drop anything or it'll come out of your pay. Elena carefully lifted the heavy silver tray, her arms shaking slightly. In her previous life, the heaviest thing she lifted was sheet music. Now she was expected to carry trays that must have weighed 20 pounds. As she turned to leave, another maid deliberately bumped into her. The tray tilted dangerously, and Elena had to use all her strength to keep it steady. The other maid, a blonde woman with a cruel smile, laughed. Watch where you're going, clumsy, she said loudly. The other staff members snickered. Elena's face burned with humiliation, but she kept walking. Maya's memories told her this was normal. This happened every day. The other staff members, led by Mrs. Patterson, treated her like she was worthless. The morning room was beautiful, a stark contrast to the servants' quarters. Large windows let in the early morning light, illuminating expensive furniture and artwork. Elena set down the tray carefully on the sideboard, her arms aching. As she turned to leave, she noticed an open doorway leading to another room. Through it, she could see the edge of a grand piano. Her heart skipped a beat. She moved closer, drawn to it like a magnet. The piano was a beautiful instrument, a Steinway grand, but it was covered with a white cloth and looked unused. Dust particles danced in the sunlight around it. Elena's fingers itched to touch the keys, to feel that familiar smoothness, to hear music again. "What are you doing?" Elena spun around to find a tall man standing in the doorway. He was in his early 30s, wearing an expensive suit, his dark hair perfectly styled. His expression was cold and distant. This had to be Adrian Sinclair, the owner of the manor. Maya's memories painted him as a ghost, someone who lived in the house but rarely acknowledged the staff's existence. "I'm sorry, sir. I was just finishing with the breakfast tray," Elena stammered. He looked at her with barely concealed disinterest, then his eyes moved to the piano. Something flickered across his face, too quick to read. "That piano belonged to my mother. No one plays it anymore." "That's sad," Elena said before she could stop herself. "A piano like that should be played. Music shouldn't be locked away." His eyes snapped back to her, suddenly sharp and focused. It was clear that maids didn't usually speak to him like this. Maya certainly never had. For a long moment they stared at each other. "Get back to work," he said finally, his voice flat. Elena hurried out, her heart pounding. She had just broken one of the household's unspoken rules. Servants should be invisible. The rest of the day was brutal. Elena was assigned to clean the entire second floor, a task that usually took 2 people. Her back ached, her hands hurt, and she had no idea how to use half the cleaning supplies properly. Every time she made a small mistake, Mrs. Patterson appeared to criticize her. At lunch, the other staff members deliberately sat away from her. When she went to get food, she found that all the good portions were already taken, leaving her with scraps. One of the other maids whispered something, and the others laughed, looking in her direction. By evening, Elena was exhausted in a way she had never experienced. Concert performances were tiring, but this was different. This was physical labor combined with constant emotional abuse. She dragged herself back to her tiny room and collapsed on the bed. As she lay there in the darkness, tears finally came. She was Elena Hartwell, one of the most celebrated pianists of her generation, and now she was trapped in the body of a maid who everyone treated like dirt. She had no idea how this happened or if she would ever get back to her real life. But as she closed her eyes, one image stayed with her. That beautiful piano, covered in dust, waiting for someone to bring it back to life. Maybe, just maybe, that could be her way forward. Because even in this impossible situation, she was still a pianist. And a pianist needs music to survive. 3 days had passed since Elena woke up in Maya's body, and she still had no answers. Every morning she hoped to wake up in her own bed, in her own life. But every morning she found herself in that cramped attic room, staring at the cracked ceiling. She tried to understand what happened. Was Maya still somewhere inside this body? Was Elena's real body lying in a hospital somewhere? The questions drove her crazy, but she had no choice except to keep going. If she acted too strangely, people would notice. So she played the role of Maya, the quiet maid who everyone ignored or insulted. The bullying got worse each day. Mrs. Patterson seemed to have a personal mission to make her life miserable. That morning, Elena was cleaning the main staircase when the head housekeeper walked past and deliberately kicked over her bucket of soapy water. It splashed everywhere, soaking Elena's dress and creating a huge mess on the freshly polished floor. "Look at what you've done, you clumsy, worthless girl," Mrs. Patterson shouted loud enough for everyone to hear. "Clean this up immediately and you'll stay late tonight to redo the entire staircase." Elena bit her tongue, knowing that any defense would make things worse. She got down on her hands and knees and started cleaning while other staff members walked past, some laughing, others just looking away. No one helped. No one ever helped Maya. Later that afternoon, Elena went to the kitchen for her lunch break. The cook had prepared sandwiches for the staff, but when Elena reached for one, the blonde maid named Vivian slapped her hand away. "These are for people who actually do their work properly," Vivian said with a nasty smile. "You can eat after everyone else is done." By the time everyone finished, only stale bread and a bruised apple remained. Elena took them without complaint and ate alone in the corner. Her stomach growled with hunger, but she was getting used to that feeling. That night, Elena lay in bed unable to sleep. The combination of hunger, exhaustion, and despair kept her awake. Around midnight, she decided she couldn't stay in that room any longer. She needed something to remind her of who she really was. She needed the piano. Elena crept down the servants' stairs, careful to avoid the steps that creaked. The manor was silent and dark. She made her way to the ballroom where she had seen the piano days earlier. Her heart pounded as she slowly opened the door. Moonlight streamed through the tall windows, casting silver shadows across the room. The piano sat in the corner, still covered with its white cloth. Elena approached it like it was a sacred object. She carefully removed the cloth, revealing the beautiful instrument underneath. Her hands trembled as she lifted the lid and exposed the keys. They gleamed in the moonlight, ivory and ebony, perfectly arranged. She sat down on the bench and took a deep breath. Then she began to play. The moment her fingers touched the keys, everything else disappeared. The pain, the humiliation, the confusion about her situation all melted away. There was only the music. She played Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, pouring every emotion she had into each note. The melody filled the empty ballroom, sad and beautiful and powerful. She didn't play like a maid who had never had proper lessons. She played like Elena Hartwell, concert pianist. Her fingers moved with perfect precision, her body swaying with the rhythm, completely lost in the music. She moved from one piece to another, playing Chopin, Debussy, and Rachmaninoff. It was like breathing again after being underwater. This was who she was. This was her identity, the one thing that couldn't be taken away even if her body had changed. Elena was so absorbed in the music that she didn't notice the figure standing in the doorway. Adrian had returned, late from a business meeting, exhausted and frustrated. Another day of endless negotiations and fake smiles. He loosened his tie as he walked through the dark manor, heading for his study where a glass of whiskey waited. Then he heard it, piano music, floating through the empty halls like a ghost. He followed the sound to the ballroom and stopped in the doorway, frozen. There, sitting at his mother's piano, was the maid, the one who had spoken to him about music days ago. But this wasn't some amateur plinking away at the keys. This was extraordinary. She played with such skill and emotion that Adrian felt something crack inside his chest. He hadn't heard anyone play that piano since his mother died 5 years ago. He had covered it up, unable to bear looking at it. Now this stranger was bringing it back to life. He watched her silhouette in the moonlight, completely lost in the music. Her body moved naturally with each phrase, her hands dancing across the keys. The piece she was playing was complex and technically demanding, but she made it look effortless. When she finally finished and the last note faded into silence, Adrian stepped into the room. His footsteps on the wooden floor made Elena jump. She spun around, her face going pale with fear. "Sir, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to. I shouldn't have. Where did you learn to play like that?" Adrian's voice was quiet but intense. Elena's mind raced. She couldn't tell him the truth. "I taught myself," she said, the lie feeling heavy on her tongue. "When I was younger, before I came here. That's impossible. No one teaches themselves to play at that level. I had access to a piano in my village. I practiced whenever I could." The words came easier now, mixing truth with fiction. Music was everything to me. Adrian moved closer, studying her face in the moonlight. "What's your name?" "Maya, sir. I've seen you around the house. The other staff treat you badly." Elena looked down at her rough hands. "It doesn't matter, sir. Play something else," Adrian said suddenly. It wasn't a question, but a command. Before Elena could respond, the ballroom doors burst open. Mrs. Patterson stood there with her hand on the light switch, Vivian and 2 other staff members behind her. The lights flooded on, harsh and revealing. "I knew I heard something." Mrs. Patterson's voice was triumphant. "Caught red-handed, touching the master's belongings without permission." "This is theft!" "She wasn't stealing," Adrian said coldly, not taking his eyes off Elena. "She was playing." "The piano is your property, Mr. Sinclair. She had no right to touch it. I'll have her dismissed immediately. You'll do nothing of the sort." Adrian's voice was sharp as ice. "I want to hear her play." Mrs. Patterson's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "But sir, she's just a maid. She probably can't even read music." "I said I want to hear her play." The room fell silent. Elena could feel everyone's eyes on her. Mrs. Patterson's face was twisted with rage and disbelief. Vivian and the others looked confused and angry. They had come to see Maya punished, not rewarded. Elena turned back to the piano. Her hands were shaking, but she forced herself to focus. She chose a piece that had always been her favorite, Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. It was beautiful and emotional without being showy. As she played, the room seemed to hold its breath. The music floated through the air like silk, each note perfect and clear. She played with her eyes closed, forgetting about the audience, forgetting about everything except the conversation between her fingers and the keys. When she finished, silence filled the room again. Elena opened her eyes and looked at Adrian. His expression was unreadable, but something had changed in his eyes. He was looking at her like he was seeing her for the first time. "Impossible," Vivian whispered. "She can't play like that. It's not fair." "Life rarely is," Adrian said, still watching Elena. He turned to Mrs. Patterson. "From now on, Maya will have access to this piano. She's to practice whenever her duties allow. But Mr. Sinclair, that's my decision. If I hear that anyone has interfered with her practice time or treated her poorly because of this, they'll answer to me personally." His voice carried a warning that made everyone stand straighter. "Is that understood?" "Yes, sir," Mrs. Patterson said through gritted teeth. "You're all dismissed. Except you, Maya. Stay." The others filed out reluctantly, Mrs. Patterson shooting Elena a look of pure hatred. When they were alone, Adrian walked to the piano and ran his hand along its polished surface. "This piano hasn't been played in 5 years. My mother was a pianist. She died suddenly, and I couldn't bear to hear music anymore." He looked at Elena. "Until tonight. I'm sorry for your loss," Elena said softly. "Why do you let them treat you that way? Someone with your talent shouldn't be scrubbing floors." "Sometimes life doesn't give us choices, sir. We take what we can get." Adrian studied her for a long moment. Maybe it's time that changed. He walked toward the door, then paused. "Play whenever you need to. This room is yours." After he left, Elena sat alone in the ballroom, her heart racing. She had just revealed herself, shown a skill that Maya could never have possessed. It was dangerous and reckless. But as she looked at the piano gleaming in the light, she felt something she hadn't felt since waking up in this body. She felt hope. The next morning, Elena woke up to find her uniform had been torn to shreds. It lay on the floor in pieces, deliberately cut with scissors. She had only 2 uniforms, and now one was destroyed. Her heart sank as she realized this was just the beginning. Mrs. Patterson's revenge had started. Elena put on her remaining uniform and went downstairs. The kitchen fell silent when she entered. Every staff member stared at her with cold eyes. She had crossed an invisible line last night, and now she was paying the price. "Well, if it isn't our little piano prodigy," Vivian said loudly, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Too good to eat with us regular people now." Elena ignored her and reached for a piece of bread from the breakfast table. Another maid pulled the plate away. "This food is for staff who know their place," the woman said. Elena's stomach was already growling from missing dinner the night before, but she said nothing. She simply turned and left the kitchen, hearing their laughter follow her down the hall. The day got worse. Mrs. Patterson assigned her to clean the entire East Wing alone, a job that normally took 3 people a full day. When Elena worked through lunch to try to finish, she returned to find someone had poured dirty water all over the floors she had just cleaned. She had to start over. By mid-afternoon, Elena was exhausted and dizzy from hunger. Her hands were raw from scrubbing and her back ached from bending over all day, but she kept going, knowing that any complaint would only make things worse. Then everything changed. At 4 o'clock, Adrian gathered all the household staff in the main hall. Elena stood in the back, trying to be invisible. Adrian looked professional and distant in his expensive suit, every bit the powerful CEO. "In 3 weeks, this house will host a charity gala," he announced. "We'll have over 200 guests, including business partners and important community members." "I want everything to be perfect," Mrs. Patterson beamed. This was her chance to shine. "Of course, Mr. Sinclair, we'll make sure every detail is flawless." "Good, I also want entertainment for the evening. A piano performance." Adrian paused and Elena felt her heart skip. "I'm opening auditions to everyone, staff included." The room erupted in whispers. Mrs. Patterson's smile faltered for just a moment. "My niece, Bella, has been taking piano lessons since she was 6, Mrs. Patterson said quickly. "She'd be honored to perform for your guests. Anyone who wishes to audition may do so," Adrian said firmly. "I'll choose based on talent, not connections." His eyes moved across the room and landed on Elena for just a second. It was brief, but everyone noticed. The whispers grew louder. After Adrian left, Elena felt brave enough to approach Mrs. Patterson. "I'd like to audition," she said quietly. The head housekeeper's face turned red. "You? You think you can perform in front of Mr. Sinclair's important guests? You're delusional. Mr. Sinclair said anyone could try." "You'll embarrass yourself in this entire household," Vivian chimed in. "You're just a maid. Know your place," but Elena had already made up her mind. She walked to the sign-up sheet on the wall and wrote her name. The other staff members gathered around, reading it, their faces a mixture of shock and amusement. "This is going to be hilarious," someone muttered. "She actually thinks she has a chance against Bella." Poor, deluded girl. Elena walked away, her cheeks burning but her head held high. She had performed at Carnegie Hall. She could handle a house party. The next 3 weeks were the hardest of Elena's life. Harder than any concert preparation she had ever done. Mrs. Patterson made sure of it. First, she changed Elena's schedule. Her audition was supposed to be on Tuesday at 2 in the afternoon. When Tuesday came, Elena rushed to the ballroom only to find Bella already performing. "Oh, didn't you hear?" Mrs. Patterson said with fake sweetness. "We had to move the schedule around. Your slot is now Thursday at 6 in the morning." 6 in the morning meant Elena would have to wake up at 4 to prepare. It also meant Adrian might not even be awake to hear her. But that wasn't all. Mrs. Patterson tripled Elena's workload. She was assigned to clean the entire house from top to bottom, polish all the silver, and help in the kitchen. She worked from 5 in the morning until 11 at night. "You'll need to practice, won't you?" Mrs. Patterson said with a cruel smile. "Better learn to manage your time." Elena practiced late at night after everyone was asleep. She crept down to the ballroom at midnight and played until 2 in the morning, then dragged herself back to bed for 3 hours of sleep before starting all over again. Her fingers hurt. Her body hurt. Everything hurt. But she refused to give up. The other staff members joined in the torture. They hid her practice sheets, the ones where she had written down the pieces she wanted to perform. Someone put soap in her drinking water. Her second uniform mysteriously got a huge stain that wouldn't come out, forcing her to wear the same dirty clothes for days. At meals, they made sure she got the smallest portions, sometimes nothing at all. Elena grew thinner, her face pale and drawn. Dark circles appeared under her eyes. "Maybe you should quit," Vivian suggested one morning, her voice falsely concerned. "You look terrible. Do you really want to humiliate yourself in front of everyone?" "I'm not quitting," Elena said. "Bella has been training for years. She's performed at recitals, won competitions. What have you done? Taught yourself?" "That's adorable," Elena said nothing. Let them underestimate her. She had played for queens and presidents. She had received standing ovations from the toughest critics in the world. These people had no idea who they were dealing with, but doubt crept in during the dark hours of the night. This body was tired and weak from poor food and constant work. Her fingers didn't move quite as smoothly as they used to. What if Maya's body couldn't perform at Elena's level? What if the muscle memory didn't translate? 1 week before the audition, disaster struck. Elena was carrying a tray of crystal glasses to the dining room when someone stuck out their foot. She didn't see it until too late. She tripped and the tray went flying. Glass shattered everywhere. The sound was deafening. Mrs. Patterson appeared instantly, as if she had been waiting for this moment. "Look at what you've done. Those glasses were priceless antiques." "Someone tripped me," Elena protested. "More excuses." "The cost of those glasses will come out of your wages. All of them. And you're assigned extra duties for the next week." Elena looked at the other staff members, hoping someone would speak up. But they all looked away. She was completely alone. That night, she went to the ballroom for practice, but found she couldn't make her fingers work properly. They shook from exhaustion and hunger. The notes came out wrong. Messy. Nothing like how they should sound. She put her head down on the piano keys and felt tears slide down her cheeks. Maybe everyone was right. Maybe she was crazy to think she could do this. She was so tired, so hungry, so completely worn down. "I thought I might find you here." Elena's head shot up. Adrian stood in the doorway, his tie loosened, looking tired from his own long day. "I'm sorry, I was just leaving," Elena said, quickly wiping her eyes. "Stay." He walked into the room and leaned against the wall, studying her. "They've been making your life difficult." It wasn't a question. Elena didn't know what to say. "I've been watching," Adrian continued. "Mrs. Patterson changed your audition time. You're being given impossible workloads. Your uniforms keep getting damaged. He paused. Why do you put up with it? Because I have to, Elena said simply. People like me don't get many chances. When one comes along, even a small one, you hold on to it no matter what. Adrian was quiet for a moment. Play something for me now. I can't, I'm too tired, and I'll just mess it up. Play anyway. Elena looked at her shaking hands. Then she thought about Elena Hartwell, who never gave up, who never let obstacles stop her. She took a deep breath and placed her fingers on the keys. She played a simple piece, a Chopin prelude. It wasn't perfect. Her fingers stumbled in a few places and she missed a note, but she poured everything into it, all her frustration and pain and stubborn hope. When she finished, Adrian was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. Thursday morning, 6 o'clock, he said. I'll be there. He left without another word, and Elena sat alone in the ballroom. Her hands were still shaking and her body screamed with exhaustion. The audition was in 3 days. She had to be ready. Thursday morning came too quickly. Elena barely slept the night before, her mind racing through the piece she had chosen. At 5 in the morning, she got up and washed her face with cold water, trying to wake herself up fully. Her reflection in the small mirror looked terrible. Her face was pale and thin with dark shadows under her eyes. Her hands trembled slightly from exhaustion and nerves, but her eyes held determination. Today was the day. She made her way down to the ballroom, expecting it to be empty. Instead, she found Mrs. Patterson, Vivian, Bella, and several other staff members already there. They sat in chairs arranged like an audience, arms crossed, wearing matching smirks. We thought we'd come watch, Vivian said sweetly. Moral support, you know. Bella sat near the piano, looking confident and polished. She wore a nice dress instead of a uniform, her hair perfectly styled. She looked like she belonged at a piano recital. Elena, in her stained work uniform, looked like exactly what she was, a tired maid. You're up first, Mrs. Patterson said, checking her watch. Let's get this over with. Elena walked to the piano on shaky legs. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. She sat down on the bench and looked at the keys. They seemed to blur in front of her eyes. Whenever you're ready, Mrs. Patterson said impatiently. Mr. Sinclair will be here any moment if he bothers to show up at all. Elena closed her eyes and took 3 deep breaths. She thought about her first real concert when she was 16. She had been terrified then too. Her teacher had told her something she never forgot. The piano doesn't care if you're scared. It only cares if you're honest. She placed her fingers on the keys and began to play. She had chosen Rachmaninoff's Prelude in G minor. It was a powerful piece, full of emotion and technical difficulty. Some people called it angry music, but Elena had always felt it was about fighting back, about refusing to be defeated. The first notes rang out clear and strong. Elena's exhaustion disappeared. Her trembling hands became steady. She wasn't in that ballroom anymore. She was somewhere else entirely, somewhere made of pure music. Her fingers flew across the keys, powerful and precise. The music built and built, filling the room with sound that was almost overwhelming. She played with everything she had, pouring weeks of frustration and pain and stubborn hope into every note. The room had gone completely silent. Mrs. Patterson's smirk had vanished. Vivian's mouth hung open slightly. Even Bella, who had been looking so confident, now stared at Elena with wide eyes. Elena moved through the difficult middle section, her hands crossing and recrossing, hitting every note perfectly. The piece demanded strength and control, and she gave it both. This wasn't the playing of someone who had taught themselves. This was mastery. As she reached the final section, she heard the ballroom door open quietly. She didn't look up, didn't break her concentration, but she knew Adrian had arrived. The last notes crashed out like thunder, then faded into silence. Elena's hands hovered over the keys for a moment before she lowered them to her lap. She was breathing hard, her heart racing. No one spoke, no one moved. Then Adrian began to clap. It was slow, deliberate, the sound echoing in the quiet room. He walked forward from the doorway, his eyes fixed on Elena. That was extraordinary, he said simply. Mrs. Patterson recovered first. Yes, well, it was adequate, I suppose. But now let me present my niece, Bella. She's been professionally trained and has performed at many— I'd like to hear her, of course, Adrian interrupted smoothly. But I want to be clear about something first. He looked around at all the staff members. What I just witnessed wasn't amateur playing. That was professional level. Conservatory level. His eyes landed on Elena. Where did you really learn to play? Elena's mind raced. She couldn't tell him the truth, but she couldn't keep lying either. I had access to a piano when I was younger. I practiced every day for years. Music was all I had. Adrian studied her for a long moment, and Elena had the feeling he knew she wasn't telling him everything. But he didn't push. Instead, he turned to Bella. Please go ahead. Bella stood up, visibly nervous now. She smoothed her dress and sat at the piano, taking a moment to adjust the bench. Then she began to play. She chose a Mozart sonata, a safe and pretty piece. Her playing was technically correct. She hit all the right notes, kept proper tempo, and made no mistakes. It was perfectly fine, but it was also perfectly forgettable. There was no passion, no fire, nothing that made you feel anything. When she finished, Adrian clapped politely. That was very nice. Thank you. She's been taking lessons since she was 6, Mrs. Patterson jumped in quickly. She's won 3 competitions in our region. She's very accomplished. I'm sure she is, Adrian said. His tone was neutral, but everyone in the room understood what he wasn't saying. Mr. Sinclair, Mrs. Patterson pressed on, her voice getting desperate. Surely you see that Bella is more appropriate for your gala. She's presentable, well-trained, and she knows how to behave in front of important people. Maya is just a maid. She'd be completely out of place. Maya will perform at the gala, Adrian said firmly, as the main entertainment. The room exploded into whispers and gasps. Bella's face turned red and she looked like she might cry. Vivian stared at Elena with pure hatred. Mrs. Patterson opened and closed her mouth several times, unable to form words. But sir, this is highly irregular. Mrs. Patterson finally managed. The girl is staff. What will your guests think? They'll think they're hearing exceptional music, Adrian replied coolly. My decision is final. Over the next 2 weeks, Elena's life changed in ways she never expected. Adrian gave her time off from her regular duties to practice. He arranged for proper meals to be delivered to her 3 times a day. He even had a better room prepared for her, one with actual furniture and a window that wasn't broken. Mrs. Patterson was furious but powerless to stop it. She watched with barely concealed rage as Elena received treatment usually reserved for important staff. But more surprising than any of this was Adrian himself. He started spending time in the ballroom while Elena practiced. At first, he just sat quietly in the corner working on his laptop. But gradually they began to talk. Why did you cover the piano for so long? Elena asked one evening during a break. Adrian was quiet for a moment. My mother played every day. After she died, the sound of piano music was too painful. It reminded me of everything I'd lost. He looked at Elena. But when I heard you play that first night, something changed. The pain was still there, but so was something else. Beauty. Hope, maybe. Your mother would have wanted the piano to be played, Elena said softly. Music shouldn't die with us. It should continue. You're wise for someone so young, Adrian said, a slight smile on his face. Elena almost laughed. If only he knew she had 20 years more experience than this body showed. They talked about music, about life, about dreams that seemed impossible. Adrian told her about the pressure of running a company, of always having to be perfect and controlled. Elena told him about the isolation of being talented in a world that judged you by your position, not your abilities. Why do you let them treat you so badly? Adrian asked one night. You could leave. Find a position somewhere else. Someone with your talent shouldn't be scrubbing floors. Sometimes staying and proving them wrong is more satisfying than running away, Elena replied. Adrian looked at her with something in his eyes that made Elena's heart skip. It wasn't pity or even admiration. It was respect, and maybe something more. The night before the gala, Elena was practicing when Adrian came in carrying a large box. I had this made for you, he said, placing the box on a chair. For tomorrow night. Elena opened it carefully and gasped. Inside was a beautiful dress, deep blue silk with delicate embroidery. It was simple but elegant, the kind of thing a professional performer would wear. I can't accept this, Elena said, though her hands touched the soft fabric longingly. You can, and you will. Tomorrow night you're not performing as a maid. You're performing as a pianist. There's a difference. Their eyes met, and for a moment Elena forgot to breathe. Adrian stood close enough that she could smell his cologne, see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. Why are you doing all this? She whispered. Because talent like yours shouldn't be hidden, Adrian said. And because watching you play is like seeing the world in color after years of gray. He left before Elena could respond, and she stood alone in the ballroom holding the dress, her heart racing for reasons that had nothing to do with the performance ahead. Tomorrow was the gala. Tomorrow everything would change again. Elena didn't know if she should be excited or terrified. But as she looked at the beautiful dress and the piano waiting for her, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. She felt alive. The day of the gala arrived with perfect weather. Sunshine streamed through the manor's windows as staff rushed around preparing for the evening. Flowers were arranged, tables were set, and everything sparkled with polish and care. Elena stayed in her new room, trying to calm her nerves. The blue dress hung on the door, beautiful and waiting. She had performed for thousands before, but tonight felt different. Tonight felt important in a way she couldn't quite explain. Around 4 in the afternoon, there was a knock on her door. She opened it to find Adrian standing there, looking concerned. "I need you to come to the ballroom," he said. "There's a problem." Elena's heart dropped. She followed him quickly down the stairs and into the ballroom. When she saw the piano, she gasped. Someone had tampered with it. Several strings were cut, hanging loose inside the instrument. The damage was deliberate and cruel. "The piano couldn't be played like this. Who would do this?" Elena whispered, though she already knew. "I have security footage," Adrian said, his voice tight with anger. "Mrs. Patterson paid one of the temporary workers to damage it. She thought if the piano was broken, the performance would be canceled." As if summoned by her name, Mrs. Patterson appeared in the doorway with Vivian and several other staff members. She looked surprised to see them there. "Oh my, what happened to the piano?" Mrs. Patterson said, her voice dripping with false concern. "What terrible timing. I suppose we'll have to cancel the musical entertainment?" "On the contrary," Adrian said coldly. "I know exactly what happened, and I know who was responsible." Mrs. Patterson's face went pale. "I have no idea what you're talking about. I have video evidence of you paying someone to sabotage the piano." "You're fired, effective immediately. You have 1 hour to collect your belongings and leave the property." "You can't do this. I've worked here for 15 years. And you've spent those years creating a toxic environment, bullying staff members and now destroying property. You're lucky I'm not pressing charges." Adrian's voice was ice cold. "Security will escort you out." Mrs. Patterson looked around desperately at the other staff members, but no one met her eyes. Even Vivian stepped away from her, not wanting to be associated with her downfall. "This is because of her." Mrs. Patterson pointed at Elena, her face twisted with rage. "That nobody maid who thinks she's special. She's manipulated you. Leave, now." Adrian didn't raise his voice, but the command was absolute. 2 security guards appeared and escorted Mrs. Patterson out. Her protests echoed down the hallway until they faded away. Vivian and the others quickly scattered, not wanting to face Adrian's anger. When they were alone, Elena looked at the damaged piano and felt tears threatening. "The gala is in 3 hours. There's no time to fix it, I know," Adrian said, "but I have a solution." He led her to another room she had never been in before. It was clearly his mother's old music room, preserved exactly as she had left it. And there, in the center, stood another piano. It was older than the one in the ballroom, but it was beautiful, with dark wood and ivory keys that gleamed softly. "This was my mother's personal piano," Adrian said quietly. "I couldn't bear to move it or sell it after she died. But I think she would have wanted you to play it tonight." Elena touched the keys gently and they responded with a pure, sweet sound. "It's beautiful. The movers are coming to transport it to the ballroom carefully. It'll be ready in time." Elena turned to face him. "Why are you doing all this, really?" "I'm just a maid who appeared in your house. You don't know anything about me." Adrian stepped closer. "I know that you're talented beyond measure. I know that you've endured cruelty with dignity. I know that when you play, you make me feel things I thought I'd forgotten how to feel." He paused. "And I know that I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since that first night I heard you play." Elena's breath caught. In her old life as a famous pianist, men had admired her, but it always felt shallow, based on her fame and success. Adrian didn't know about any of that. He only knew Maya, the maid with impossible talent and stubborn hope. "The gala starts in a few hours," Adrian said softly. "After tonight, things are going to change. People will hear you play and opportunities will come. You might leave this place, find a better life." He looked directly into her eyes. "But before that happens, I need you to know that these past few weeks, getting to know you, have been the best part of my day." Every day, Elena didn't know what to say. Her heart was beating so fast she thought he might hear it. "I should let you prepare," Adrian said, stepping back. "I'll see you tonight." After he left, Elena sat at his mother's piano and played a few notes. The instrument was perfectly tuned, responsive, and warm. She thought about everything that had happened since she woke up in Maya's body. The confusion, the pain, the bullying, and now this, something she never expected. She was falling in love with Adrian Sinclair. The evening arrived with a flurry of activity. Guests began arriving in expensive cars, dressed in elegant gowns and tailored suits. The manor glowed with candlelight and flowers. Elena watched from a window as 200 people filled the ballroom, their conversations creating a low hum of anticipation. She put on the blue dress, and it fit perfectly. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the person staring back. She looked confident, graceful, like someone who belonged on stage. A soft knock on the door made her turn. One of the staff members, a younger woman who had never been cruel to her, stood there with a shy smile. "You look beautiful," she said. "I wanted to say I'm sorry for not standing up for you before. That was wrong." "Thank you," Elena said, genuinely touched. "We're all rooting for you tonight. Show them what you can do." Elena made her way to the ballroom, her heart pounding. She waited in the wings while Adrian addressed his guests, thanking them for coming and explaining the evening's entertainment. "Tonight, I have the privilege of introducing you to an extraordinary talent," Adrian said. "She's someone who reminds us that genius can be found in the most unexpected places. Please welcome our performer for the evening." Elena walked onto the small stage area and the room fell silent. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her as she sat at the piano. She took a deep breath and placed her fingers on the keys. She had chosen several pieces for the evening, starting with something gentle and welcoming, a Chopin waltz that made people smile. Then she moved to something more emotional, Debussy's Clair de Lune, and she heard someone in the audience sigh with pleasure. For her final piece, she chose the most challenging work in her repertoire, Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody. Her fingers flew across the keys, powerful and precise. The music filled the room with energy and passion, building to a climax that left the audience breathless. When she finished, there was a moment of complete silence. Then the entire room erupted in applause. People stood, clapping and cheering. Elena saw tears on some faces, smiles on others. In the front row, Adrian stood with an expression of pride and something deeper, something that made her heart soar. After the performance, people crowded around her. A distinguished older man introduced himself as a conductor for the city orchestra. A woman gave her a card for a prestigious music academy. Someone else mentioned recording opportunities. But through all of it, Elena kept looking for Adrian. When she finally found him, he was standing by the garden doors waiting for her. "You were magnificent," he said when she reached him. "I couldn't have done it without you." "Yes, you could have. You would have found a way. That's who you are." He held out his hand. "Walk with me?" They stepped into the garden, leaving the noise of the party behind. The night air was cool and sweet, and stars sparkled overhead. "You're going to leave, aren't you?" Adrian asked quietly. "All those opportunities, those people who can help you build a real career. You'd be crazy to stay here as a maid." Elena thought about her old life, about being a famous pianist named Elena. That life felt distant now, like it belonged to someone else. She thought about all the pain Maya had endured, but also about the surprising gifts this life had brought her. "What if I don't want to leave?" she said softly. Adrian stopped walking and turned to face her. "What? In my old life, before I came here, I had success. I had recognition. But I was lonely. I played for thousands of people, but I didn't really connect with anyone." She looked up at him. "These past weeks have been hard, but they've also been real. You've been real." "Maya," Adrian said, and hearing him say that name with such tenderness made something shift inside her. Maybe she wasn't Elena anymore. Maybe she was Maya now, and that was okay. "I can't ask you to give up opportunities for me. That wouldn't be fair. You're not asking. I'm choosing," she smiled. "I don't have to choose between music and happiness. I can have both. I can teach music, perform locally, build something meaningful here, with you." Adrian pulled her close, and Elena felt like she had finally come home. Not to a body or a place, but to a person who saw her truly. who valued her for who she was inside. "I love you," Adrian whispered. "I think I have since that first night I heard you play." "I love you too," Elena said, and she meant it with all her heart. They stood in the garden under the stars, two people who had found each other in the most unexpected way. The party continued inside, but they stayed outside, just being together. Elena never did figure out how she ended up in Maya's body, or if she would ever return to her old life. But as time passed, she stopped wondering. She started teaching piano to children in the community, giving them the gift of music that had saved her. She performed at local events and small concerts, finding joy in intimate performances rather than grand stages. And every evening, she and Adrian would sit together in the music room, sometimes playing, sometimes just talking, building a life that was simple but rich with love. She had been a world-famous pianist, but she had been alone. Now she was just Maya, a woman who played piano and loved deeply and found happiness in unexpected places. And that, she decided, was more than enough. It was everything.